Hi, I'm Alex,
Hi, I'm Steph.
and this is our debate. Wait, something doesn't seem right. That's better. Hi, I'm Alex,
And I'm Steph.
and
And
this
this
is
is
our
our
debate.
debate.
My position is to talk about why I think ethics education and training will reduce corporate collapses globally in the future.
And my position is to defend why ethics education and training will have little or no impact on reducing corporate collapses globally in the future.
Globally, the requirement for ethics education and trainings could not be more essential. The effect that corporate collapses have had in the last 15 years has significantly changed the world we live in today. Back in 2007, the global financial crisis occurred and caused tremendous damage to people all over the world. This was a result of greed and terrible decision making and highly unethical behavior. This behavior led to Lehman Brothers going bankrupt in 2008, resulting in over 25,000 employees losing their jobs. Clearly, the need for further ethics education and training must be sustained and improved to ensure further collapses like this never happen again. All over the world, we see that ethics are perceived differently by different nations. In Australia, accepting a bribe is considered unethical and is against the law, while in other countries like Iraq, taking a bribe is a part of the culture and is considered to be the cost of doing business. This was illustrated in AWB oil for wheat scandal when AWB Limited paid kickbacks to Saddam Hussein in exchange for highly beneficial wheat contracts. These payments broke both United Nations sanctions and Australian law. These changes were ultimately dropped, had a considerable effect on AWB. AWB has since gone on to majorly restructure after it lost its monopoly supply of Australia. This is just one example of how acting unethically can result in organisations' reputation being greatly diminished. If ethics education and training had been implemented in Iraq, shady dealings like this would be much more likely to be avoided. With so many corporate collapses, the question arises, can ethics be taught? Are ethics and morals something you have or don't have? If we look at Kohlberg's theory of moral development, it identifies three levels of moral development stages. These are pre-conventional, the conventional, and post-conventional. Kohlberg found that one of the most crucial factors when moving through these levels was education. He found when his subjects were educated in ethics, it made them perceive issues from a more universal standpoint rather than taking a single-minded approach. This highlights the need for further ethics education and how it could help unethical behavior in a corporate setting. So if people working in corporations are faced with the option to act unethically for personal benefit, they are much more unlikely to comply if they look at things from a more universal standpoint. In James Webber's academic journal, he investigated and assessed employee ethic programs in US-based global corporations. In this journal, he illustrated the importance of ethics trainings in the current economic climate. He used a great example which UK studies showed that 63% of all managers surveyed in a leader and management survey were expected to behave unethically. Of these, 83% of them had a code of ethics at their company, which they felt pressured to break. In his conclusion, he stated that ethics officers report to all their training seeks to empower employees to become more aware of ethical issues faced at work, to be better equipped with ethical decision-making skills, and thus better be able to resolve ethical challenges faced at work. Overall, Webber's journal emphasizes the need to further develop ethics training in corporations. Corporate collapses will reduce if the steps are put into place to educate and train employees about ethics. Ethics has different values and meanings in different nations, which is why it is important to ensure ethics are educated and taught globally. With ethics, education and training, we are likely to see the reduction of unethical behavior and corporate collapses in the future.
Corporate collapses are fueled by fraud, greed, and opportunity. The culture of a company, which is a behaviour or certain way to act, is set from the top down. Managers hire staff who are like-minded. If there's a corrupt management team, they will not hire staff who they believe will be against the company's activities. Organisations are under enormous pressure to meet targets. Sometimes these targets can be unrealistic. The organisation needs to ensure they have a competitive advantage. These pressures assist with fueling fraud. Corporate collapses have predominantly been in the USA, which is a well-established, developed and educated country. Evidence from the GFC proves that this training and education has not worked. Humans have destroyed public trust in the business world and through their actions have sadly lost millions of dollars of people's money and jobs globally around the world. Corporate law and ethics do not always align, and most of the time businessmen can back up acting unethically with legal defensibility. Business decisions are driven by the law. Managers are constantly looking for loopholes to make their business more profitable. Recent globalization allows countries and organisations to trade on a daily basis. I've spoken about culture and how it's a behaviour or certain way to act. So how can ethics training be effective if each culture has different morals and behaviours that have been bestowed upon them at birth and developed through their childhood and into early adulthood? For example, in the Western world, taking bribes is illegal and unethical due to the types of bribery used, such as bribes to influence government or to avoid regulation. However, in China, using bribes is how they conduct everyday business. When China is dealing with the USA, they're not going to study the ethics code for the USA, however, they will familiarise themselves with the law. Enron was a massive firm that collapsed back in 2001, which then triggered the collapse of Arthur Andersen. These collapses were examined for many years after. 10 years later, the crash of Lehman Brothers occurred alongside the GFC. Studies say that humans did not learn from Enron. In fact, they grew adaptable to the changing laws and, if anything, learnt how to manipulate the system around these new laws that had been formed. Collapses are fueled by fraud, greed, and opportunity, and education of ethics in universities may increase the knowledge of ethics, but when it comes to business and finance, it will not decrease the amount of corporate collapses. In both cases, Enron and Lehman Brothers, there was a lack of responsibility. Each person, department could blame the act of wrongdoing on someone else. For example, the NAB Bank years ago lost millions of dollars due to the rogue traders making bad investment. These rogue traders are not direct employees of NAB, but were contracted to work on behalf of them. Each party denied responsibility. Like NAB, in most cases, it's extremely hard to pinpoint one person and make them accountable for the collapse. Even if you could pinpoint one person, the punishment for fraud is not great enough to deter these opportunistic businessmen. To reduce corporate collapses, we would need to regulate the industry by limiting or embellishing employees' bonuses and not allowing employees to own shares in the organisations they work in, which will eliminate conflict of interest. CNBC also suggests that companies implementing programs where whistleblowers are rewarded for coming forward would be a more effective way to reduce corporate corruption. Let's have a look at the effects that training and education has had with similar ethical issues. McCabe, a university professor, surveyed 70,000 high school students from a wide range of schools in the United States. The results found that 95% of students admitted to some form of cheating. These school students throughout school and certainly well into university are educated about the seriousness of cheating and are advised about the punishments involved, which could go as far as being expelled. There are many measures taken to police cheating, such as teachers watching students in the exam halls and the use of high-tech programs like Turnitin. However, students are still willing to cheat. The student reward is only very small, possibly a higher grade on a subject or a difference between a pass or fail. Imagine if these students were in a business environment where they had an opportunity to make millions of dollars, potentially 20 or even 30 years after the university degree. Another similar case of ethics and education is drink driving. It has been prevalent and taught as a high priority for governments for many years. However, since 1997, 17,000 people have lost their licence from drink driving, and imagine all the drivers that have not been caught. Drink driving education is in our lives as a daily reminder, from billboards on our roads to TV advertisements. However, people still ignore the education and drink drive.
In Steph's argument, she states that business decisions are driven by the law and how they can overcome or find loopholes to make businesses more profitable, rather than thinking ethically, which is why education and training in ethics will not reduce corporate collapses. Well, yes, this may be true in some corporations, but corporations have to include ethical thinking in their decisions to avoid destroying their reputation. If corporations are seen as unethical, then they will not be trustworthy and other corporations will not do business with them. This is why almost all corporations will have a code of ethics implemented within their company. Illustrating the example of AWB again, they ruined their reputation by giving kickbacks to Saddam Hussein and ultimately lost monopoly share of Australia. This example shows that if ethics and training and education were to be further developed in Iraq and other countries, we would see less corrupt transactions globally. Steph later goes on to point out that ethics training and education will not work and uses the example of people are still drink driving today even with the education provided. And yes, this is true, people are still drink driving, but nowhere near the amount that they were. If you look at the facts, drink driving has rapidly reduced in the last 20 years. This can be closely linked with ethics education and training being implemented. We are more likely to see a reduction in corporate collapses. As highlighted before, we see that Kohlberg's theory, when people are educated in ethics, are more likely to view things from a universal standpoint and be much more open to looking at things morally. If this is applied to undeveloped countries where no ethics training is provided, we are ultimately likely to see a reduction on corporate collapses.
Alex's argument says that ethics education will reduce corporate collapses. However, the CNBC report says that it would be impossible to eliminate or reduce accounting crime. It costs the economy more than $2 trillion a year. Accountants are ahead of the law due to the advancement of technology, assisting with acts of fraud, trading, bribery, and more. There is evidence to say that cybercrime is on the increase, and even though ethics can teach and educate humans to behave in a certain way, the ever-changing industry will keep education one step behind the corruption. Alex also talks about Kohlberg's theory, which is about individuals advancing up the 6 stages. However, we are cross-cultured when it comes to business, and applying this theory to just say, for example, China would not be effective. Because unlike in Western countries where we tend to work as individuals, in China's culture they work together as a team. So it'd be hard to see if the theory is applicable to a wide blanket of countries and their cultures. There is also evidence to suggest that the higher up in an organisation you go, and the more experience you have in the industry, you actually revert back down the stages of Kohlberg's theory. At university, you're in a controlled environment. Your ethical lens will be much higher. However, out in the real world, there are many influences and outside factors that can make having a high ethical lens difficult.
In conclusion, I believe that corporate collapses can be reduced if ethics, education and training are implemented on a global scale. This will provide a better environment where corporations can prosper in a more ethical manner.
And I have demonstrated how ethics education and training will not reduce corporate collapses globally around the world due to greed and opportunity. Culture has a massive role in ethics, and each culture behaves differently, so it would be impossible to teach ethics in each country the same. There is also a lack of accountability due to the law and the volume of people involved.
Thanks for watching our debate.
Who do you think won?